silence. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the end of the term. I hope your heads are doing okay, and your hobbies and your cats and dogs and all your friends. Today, the slides will be, they're not on right very soon. They'll be up afterwards. So I think you can just listen if you want. What I want to do today is two things. One is talk about the module in fairly broad and unsatisfying terms. Okay, I admit it. But then talk, I think, much more importantly about exam preparation. As I said on Monday, if you've had a course with me before, you'll see familiar things. That doesn't mean they're unimportant. I'm not repeating them because they're trivial. I'm repeating them because I think they're absolutely core to how you might actually get the benefit of the work you do. So that's the sole purpose. But if you have any questions then in terms of anything, I'd be very happy to address those. As far as the module is concerned, I think we're all agreeing on a module, really. Three broad sections. The first, a bunch of lectures on theory, and then two broadly substantive areas that you saw kind of lumped together as one on the syllabus, but really covering different issues. And one focusing on policing and security, and one really on prisons and punishment. So what you're going to have is 2-hour exam. You'll have to answer 2 questions over the course of those 2 hours. You'll answer 1 question from each section, and I think within each section there are 3 or 4 questions to choose from. So they're a fairly broad and I think representative range of topics given what we've covered. So 2 questions, 1 from each section, 2-hour exam. Do you all know where the exam for this module will be, by the way?
Curious.
I'll take your deafening silence as a resounding, I have no idea. But you will know because you're smart and you figured these things out. But please do, every year, someone gets the time of the exam wrong, or the location, or the day. I mean, it's bad enough if you're in a traffic accident or the bus breaks down on your way to the RDS, but know the time, know the date, know where you need to be. And do that for all the modules, okay? Because it causes enough distress when everything goes according to plan, not to mind when there's an unforeseen emergency. So, in terms of the 2 various sections, the one dealing with policing, the one dealing with broader issues of punishment. Those are the lecture topics we covered in broad terms. And as you can see, it's a chronological list of the topics in the order we address them. There's obviously overlap, okay? There's obviously overlap across them, between them, among them. And just because something appears in one section doesn't mean you can't draw on material from a different section, and that includes the theory topics, which because ostensibly they would have been covered ideally through the essay. We're not assessing them here in the exam format. But if there's knowledge, if there's material, if there's things you've done that are relevant to the exam questions from those topics, by all means bring them in. The issue is relevant and the judgment is yours. Will it help you answer the question more effectively? If so, by all means. Okay. But these are the broad topics, beginning with the criminal justice system. What is it? What does it look like? And importantly, does it do what it says on the tin? If it's set up as an adversarial system, how come so few cases actually go to trial, even though that's the epitome of it? What model should be involved? What ideology, and so on. As far as the historical development of policing is concerned, again, one important thing to bear in mind is simply that just because we're living in this particular moment in history doesn't mean that we can assume everyone else was wrong or stupid or ill-conceived in how they did things. Before the state, people dealt with things in very different ways. So So just charting the development of policing, how did we come to have a situation or a policing institution that now people value so much, when initially it was quite a shock to the system? How did the particular political colonial context of Ireland feature in that? And what are the consequences of that? As the Guards developed, one of the clear features of their ideology was to establish a distinction between them and the RIC which preceded them, to show that they were not a colonial force, that they were not a paramilitary force, to show that rather their focus, their orientation was towards some notion of Irishness or nationalism or community or identity. And how did that play out? As far as policing roles and activities are concerned, one of the key issues to consider always is that policing seems to be about crime, so we think, yet the reality is the police do so much more than that. Why is that? How is it? What consequences does it have in terms of how we understand the police, what we expect from them, and so on? In terms of public expectations and the issues of legitimacy, those issues kind of flow on from that. What do the public want? What is the nature of relations between police and public? What does it mean to police under a model of policing by consent, the model that we think would apply in a liberal democracy? What shapes relationships between police and public? What factors are particularly important? Who deals with the police more? What consequences does that have for their trust, their attitudes towards the police, their confidence in the police, and so on? As far as police governance and accountability are concerned, you invest so many resources and powers in these institutions. What happens when things go wrong? What would it look like if things went right? In other words, what would accountability look like? What would proper good governance look like? But then, of course, what issues give rise to concerns about accountability? What sources of misconduct exist? How do we explain misconduct, and how do we respond to it effectively? Okay, questions to consider. As far as private security and pure policing is concerned, one important issue to realise, again, it's a changing environment, but the greater prominence of private security. Recognising it's out there at a scale we perhaps haven't always acknowledged or appreciated. And also trying to explain how this, what seems to be a major shift, how has it come about? How does it relate to Sherry and Philip Stenning called mass private property? How does it relate to changes as far as insecurity are concerned? How does it relate to the whether we can consider policing as something we purchase as a commodity? Can we apply the same logic to policing that we apply to buying an ice cream? You buy it because you want it, you choose the flavour you want. Can we really think of policing or security provision in that way? Okay. And then, again, following on from that, the issue of urban control and gated communities in particular. Just to emphasise that social control has a spatial component. It occurs in a particular spatial context. And it often specifically targets mobility. You're free to go here, you're not free to go there unless these conditions apply. And we see that very evident in the growth of gated communities. Again, where do these themes come from? Do they reflect general concerns about insecurity? We feel insecure, therefore the solution is, oh, more security. I'll live in a more secure environment. I'll buy a more secure house. I'll live behind a gate. What does that mean? What are the social consequences of that? And one of the ironies is that many of the people who provide the security in the gated community, they're the very people that the gated community is supposedly intended to keep out. The poor people who live elsewhere. Surprise, surprise, they're the ones who clean these places. And moving on to the second section, as far as philosophies of punishment is concerned, generally we talk about issues of reform and rehabilitation, we talk about issues of deterrence, we talk about issues of retribution. The irony, of course, is that they might all be subject to criticism. So are you familiar with each of those approaches, each of those philosophies? What's the basis on which punishment is administered according to each model? And does that hold water? It's called the philosophy of punishment. Is it a defensible philosophy? Is it an argument that can be sustained? Or what criticisms would you identify in each of them? One of the ways we typically talk about punishment is through imprisonment. And again, that's kind of a very narrow understanding of punishment. The much more obvious punishments are fines or some kind of community service, some kind of non-custodial sentence. And yet, because prison is such a significant phenomenon and institution, it makes sense to highlight it. So what does a prison regime look like? What factors distinguish one or imprisonment in one society from another, or indeed how it changes over time? If we can talk about the prison institution, one other way of understanding it is through the experience of a prison. And on the one hand, what happens within the prison in terms of prison culture? How does it actually shape the nature of what it is to be confined in a prison institution? But also then, recognizing that in some contexts in particular, those consequences are felt much more by some groups than others. So in the context of mass imprisonment in the US, what were the drivers, what were the factors which led to such a phenomenal growth in the prison population? And how come it came to target and impact racial and ethnic minority groups in particular, and how that intersected with issues of inequality? So on the one hand, we have the experience of prison within the walls, and then also, in effect, how it relates to wider society. And then, two last lectures, really, in a sense, a critique of the retributive model of punishment. On the one hand, abolitionism simply asks us to think about and consider seriously, how do we minimize imprisonment? If the ideal is to abolish prisons, what are practical ways of limiting its use? What issues do they raise? What challenges do they raise? Restorative justice is one prominent and again increasingly important way of dealing with problems. And its focus upon restoration rather than retribution. Its focus upon addressing the needs of the victim, addressing the ripple effects on communities, and also, of course, identifying issues such as the reintegration of prisoners. Most people who go into prison, they come out again. Therefore, it might be in everyone's interest that when they came out of prison, they were in a better condition than when they went in. So in that sense, it's actually to everyone's benefit that if we punish people, we do it in a way that makes everyone better, The idea that you would send someone into prison and then they come out and they're more likely to commit crime, that's a disaster. And yet that seems to be one of the features of the current system. So what would be a sensible way to address the problems in society? And what potential is there within restorative justice? And then the last thing to talk about was the issue of risk. The extent to which this discourse, this notion of prevention and prediction play out within the criminal justice system. Feely and Simon talk about the new penology, this shift away from very much a people-changing focused model of punishment, and instead almost towards a warehousing or a management approach. The idea that really we're just trying to manage dangerousness rather than fix or cure or help people. That we're simply trying to contain them in various ways. But we also see the issue of prediction playing out in a policing context, and the extent to which big data, in particular, these massive databases that are growing by the moment, the extent to which they allow for a more focused, targeting model of policing. And whether, in effect, this is a good thing, a bad thing, or we're still making up our minds. But again, these are issues where it's good to know about the phenomena, but it's also good to reflect on it. Not simply that we're there to repeat everything we read, but we're there to actually form judgments, to make opinions. And not just for the purpose of this exam and this module, but also because many of these issues relate to concerns that we all will face in our lives, in various personal challenges we may face, but also as members of the electorate. You will all be voting on various issues over the course of imminent elections and elections far into the future. Many of these issues are part and parcel of the agenda that people will be asking you to vote on. So, what do you believe? What policies do you want to support, and why? So I think far beyond anything we talk about within the confines of this lecture theatre, these are significant issues that feed into the daily lives of so many people. So I just encourage you to take them seriously, okay, beyond the academic matters. That is really the gist of my 10-minute summary of the module. Are there any particular things relating to this? Or can I move on to talk about exam preparation? Or if you have any questions that you're kind of formulating, we can certainly talk about those at the end as well. Proceed at a steady pace. Steady pace. Good pace. As you prepare, or as you reflect on the extensive preparation you've already done, a couple of questions to bring. If we're talking about institutions of police and prisons, where do they come from? What are they supposed to do? And again, this ties into philosophies, ideologies, goals, models. And what are the characteristics of what they do? But then importantly, do they actually achieve what they're supposed to? Do they offer an ideology which they then fail to deliver on? Or do they actually do other things completely? Are they counterproductive? Is it a mystery how they continue to exist, given that they say they'll do one thing, but they actually end up doing another? How do we reconcile those things? Is that a problem that people are misinformed? Is it a problem of ideology? We're committed to it regardless of what it does. How do we understand these things? And also, of course, do they achieve their goals? But also, how do they work as social institutions? In other words, how do they affect wider society? Policing doesn't stop or begin and end in terms of what a police officer does. Policing affects people, it affects society, it affects communities, it affects groups, it feeds into democracy. Is it a police state, or is it a democratic state that is supported by accountable policing and so on? And also, of course, they didn't come out of the blue, nor are they going to continue in the same vein. They will change. How do you think they will develop? How should they develop, according to your judgment? Okay. You've all done exams before. You're all experts on exams. You may not want to be, you may wish to avoid them at every opportunity, but congrats. Even if you despise them, you're doing okay because you're here. Right? So some of this is very familiar, but again, maybe that's not bad, just to emphasize, be familiar on the basis that I think it's important. What should you do? Well, the obvious thing, don't do the wrong thing. Don't do the wrong thing, right? Google says do no harm. Google is an absolute hypocrite. Me, I only speak the truth, and I'm absolutely consistent. Got a hypocritical bone in my body. Anyway, if only. So, don't be an idiot. What does that mean? It means you've gone through the labour of suffering through a semester. You've come to the lectures, you've done the reading, you've laboured with essays, you've had long and engaged discussions with your friends about the finer distinctions of the content we've covered in this module. Give yourself the opportunity to benefit from the work you've done. In other words, prepare. You've come so far, don't forget to put in the salt and the pepper to season the meal. You should revise, please do, encourage you to. But the idea that your mind will be at its best sometime between 3:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. the morning before the exam, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. And my sense is that oftentimes, even in lectures, sometimes people come to lectures and after 5 minutes, those lights, I never noticed them before. They're so captivating. And your mind drifts, your mind wanders. There's so many more interesting things than Theatre P or Theatre Q. So many. Blade Runner, is it really that much different in the director's cut? Why would they do the sequel? Was that not just offensive to everyone? What is the best Stanley Kubrick film? The answer is it's good. You're thinking about it, you're taking it seriously. Which is better, Star Wars or 2001? Which is better? The fact that one has an ending and the other doesn't, does that really matter? Once when 2001 came out, in 2001, believe it or not, in the big screen, I went to see it. And some people walked out after 25 minutes. Why? Because they'd heard about the science fiction film, but they didn't realize it was all about monkeys. And they left while the monkeys were still on screen. 2001 will be a mystery to them for the rest of their lives, and I am glad of that. So, you have other things to do. You've got food to eat. You know, the more stodgy bread, thick bread sandwiches you can eat, no, you know, be sensible. Be sensible. Be sensible. To meet up with your friends the night before the exam for an all-nighter, and I don't mean revising, I mean beer, save it till after. Right? Save it till after. When I was in college, I remember somebody who, you know, they went for a drink. Completely accidentally, they bumped into somebody on their way home from the library, studying for the exam in the morning. And they went for one, and they went for two, and I don't know what time in the morning they were having a cold shower, trying to sober up. And I recommend beaches, walks. If you can find another pair of footprints here, that's better, you know, but walk on your own, that's fine too. And again, you know, those aren't trivial words. So give yourself a chance to do well, but also recognize if you don't, big deal. My first sociology essay, I got 38%. I was invited in to meet the lecturer. Sugar. You know, life continues. Big deal. So, what should you prepare for? Prepare for poetry, prepare for drama, prepare for extensive maps of the dark side of the moon where no one has ever been or seen. Prepare for questions about the module, and particularly prepare for questions. And how do you respond to a question? You answer it. How have you prepared so far? Unfortunately, it's a very passive environment, and that's not your fault, that's kind of the institution's fault. That someone stands here and they talk, and other people, they just stand there with your eyes rolling politely in your head, you know, trying not to scream. But there is a sense that, oh, my job is to soak and absorb, and that's fine. That's one model of learning. But you're not being asked, question, have you absorbed everything you were exposed to? No, you're being asked, here's a question, answer it. So in that sense, we need to kind of reconfigure things away from absorbing, learning, studying, cramming, to expressing. Remember, think of the reader of your exam script. They don't know what's in your head. They don't. They have no idea. They only know what's written on the script. So your job is to get what's in your head onto the script in the most efficient and effective and advantageous way possible. So, the important thing is not to learn everything, but to learn to answer. So, sample questions. Look at the sample revision study questions at the end of each chapter. Look at past exam papers. And rather than try, oh my goodness, I'll prepare by writing out the answers to last year's questions. That's bound to help. It probably will help you with the clarity of your handwriting. You know, it's good to write. You know, people type too much nowadays. Writing is a craft. Just don't waste your time trying to memorize things. Because then, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the next word and I'm you're all over the place. Think of the broad themes, think of the broad points you would make. So as you look at last year's exam paper, can you answer those questions? Just bullet point your answer. Does this make sense? Is it coherent? Does it seem to reflect the information being sought? And what that does is not just show you how you might answer it, because just bullet points. You can I'll try this way, I'll try that way, I'll try this way. Oh, I like this one. This maybe is the model I would follow. The very practice of doing that will improve it. There's a famous phrase, practice makes perfect. That phrase is wrong. Practice does not make perfect. None of us are perfect. But what practice does do is make better, generally. There are very few things you get worse at the more you practice. Oh, but I like to rely on spontaneity. I like to rely on the way I feel when I'm in the zone. Thank you for writing a very short answer, which I will be able to mark very quickly. Right? So your job is not to rely on genius. Your job is to rely on common sense and the knowledge you have to put together an effective answer. But ultimately, any question, a question can come up in a different format. Hey student, what do you think about this topic? Unlikely, but it could. A quote. Discuss. What are the strengths and weaknesses of X as opposed to Y? Why did this happen? This thing says it does this, but in actuality, it seems to do this. Discuss. So the same information you can use to address different questions, different styles of questions, different formats of questions on the same topic. The important thing is, if you see a question on a topic in a different format, don't be too concerned. Some people say, how are you? Some people say, how's it going? Some people say, how's it crack? Some people say, what's up? Some people say, good afternoon. Different ways of saying the same thing. So recognize what is being asked. Recognize what is being asked. And then it's a question of what do you have in your head that you can then apply to the different format of the question. Remember, I like nothing better than to spend December and January reading every thought you have. Every precious thought. No matter how, you may think it's trivial, but please do include it. It might be important. My favorite color is letters. It's an interesting thought I've never seen before. I give you top marks for originality. Relevance, yeah. So, you're asked a question. I would like you to answer it. Fair enough? It doesn't sound unreasonable. As opposed to 6 pages, 8 pages, sometimes 16 pages later, no answer. If you haven't answered it after a couple of pages, I'm inclined to say you might not be so certain what the answer is. Just because you're adding more words doesn't mean those words are adding anything. So, if you find yourself in that situation, hold your horses. Just press the pause button and think, wait a minute, is this answer going the way I want it to go? Is it going in the direction I want it to go? Okay. There is no question that will begin, tell me everything you know about X topic. You're asked to reflect on, to discuss, to critique, to analyze, to compare, but just everything out there. No such question. No such question that's worthwhile. So, they come in different sizes, they come in different shapes, they come in different guises, but those questions will appear. Don't be freaked out if you see them in a different form. They're often simply different ways of asking the same question. Okay? I've suffered in this module later on. Oh, I hear you. I've come to every lecture, I'm sorry. I've read every book, oh dear. I've done nothing but think about this module. Oh, and I want to tell you everything I've learned. Really. Remember, 2 hours, 2 questions. If you know everything, fantastic. I encourage you to know everything. I'll be a bit sorry for the fact that you haven't been walking on the beach or eating salads or playing with the dog or whatever you're doing. But still, it's a commendable thing. You know everything. If only you were being asked, tell me everything. At last, the question I've been waiting for. Even if you knew everything, you don't have time to write it down. You've got 1 hour. Some people write 2 pages and they do very well. Some people write 16 pages and they don't do so well. The question is, do you know enough? And can you use the information you have to address the question that is being asked, or that is being asked? So, a good answer. Whodunits. The best. They read easy. Crime novels. Ricky Spillane used to write them out in about 3 weeks. He'd write a novel in 3 weeks. I don't know how many books he wrote. 50. Whenever he had a bill to pay, well, that's how to write a novel. A mystery novel. He wrote crime novels. A crime novel, whodunit, you don't know until the last page. The reader is on the edge of their seat. Who done it? I have no idea. I want to have an idea. I want to know who did it. And I want you to tell me at the very start, ideally. Because that's your compass point. That's your direction. I'm heading in this way. This is my destination. And then the answer is simply the various steps involved. But the idea that the direction is only clear, or the destination is only clear in the very last sentence, that's a missed opportunity. That's a missed opportunity. Because as you're taking the scenic route, no more than you looking up at the boards in the ceiling, oh my goodness. Oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, I see in 2 gardens over they've put in a tree. Gosh, that's interesting. Where was I again? Answer the question. Don't keep it a mystery. If you know the answer, spell it out. Bore me with your clarity. Oh, I'm being a bit coy. Well, I'd like to tell you, but I'll tease it up. No. Tell me. Bore me with banality. Bore me with reality. What do you need? You need a bit of substantive knowledge. You need the answer. Okay. And ideally, this should be, avoid such things as everyone knows. Research shows. Sometimes those phrases are used when people aren't sure what the research shows. And sometimes people just make it up. I know it, because sometimes when people say that, no, the research does not show that. So can I encourage you